All right, I'm going to give it one last try. October 29th. Here we go. First of all, uh, I haven't been doing a lot of these videos. Gosh, I think I did about 60. And it all started a couple years ago with the idea that I was learning about these things and meditating, and I wanted to just pass on these quotes, these ideas that I thought were so beautiful from the religions of India. I also wanted to memorialize it in case anybody ever asked, well, what is that? It's just really hard, I think, to describe. So if I put it on a video, perhaps it would be easier to say, well, here's go take a look. And I think I kind of got through it. I didn't feel like there was a whole lot left I wanted to communicate. So then it kind of became like the last one I was on vote. And I was just kind of pissed off, not pissed, just observing the mayhem that the country has been thrown into by a divisive, ugly nature. And so I said, look, here's a quote from the great Swami Vivekananda. Talked about how a good path will always create future, it'll create oneness, it'll create working togetherness, that whole idea. And that when you have that separation and divisiveness and finger pointing and all of that, that's the wrong direction. So this kind of follows a similar path. I was going to, and maybe I will still name it, trying to make everyone the same is the wrong way. But then it became, wait a second, we have this all is one, this oneness, infinity, and then over here is separateness. So how do these two things work together? Anyway, let's just kind of walk through this. But before we go any further, I realized in going over some things, so let me just bring this up. I always bring up these books, and I bring up this, since I'm going to talk about this uniformity in all the religions, and I also believe philosophies to a degree. I usually use this book, the bottom middle one, the Sermon on the Mount, as viewed by Vedanta, and I think it's just fabulous. And but I now have to apologize for my ignorance, biblical ignorance. I've tried to learn, I've tried to understand, but I made some mistakes in my past. I think conceptually I was correct, but I was also dead on wrong. This author is of the books, The Sermon on the Mount as seen by Vedanta, is a disciple of Vedanta Hinduism. But he also lectures on the Sermon on the Mount. And it's really beautiful because he takes the words from the Bible and then the words from Vivekananda or Sri Ramakrishna from Vedanta Hinduism and shows that the words are different, but the concepts are the same. And that we start to then really embrace the unity and oneness of it all. And I'm going to tell you a couple of stories on that. Now, the reason I'm apologizing is I mentioned something called the Beatitudes. And he has all of these concepts in there, and some of them are the biblical Beatitudes, as they're called. But there's other ones in there. You can't serve God and mammon, or you are the salt of the earth, or something. And I just think these are beautiful concepts. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I somehow, in ignorance, thought they were all somewhat the Beatitudes or part of the Sermon on the Mount. That was wrong. I'm looking at it right now, the Sermon on the Mount. We've probably heard a lot of these things. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. These are the Beatitudes. And I added on some of these other beautiful concepts as if it was all part of that. And that was I'm sure some Christians, some biblical scholars threw their coffee cup at the monitor when they heard me. Sorry. Conceptually, what the purpose of that book was correct. Anyway, I wanted to correct that right off the bat. What else we got? Okay. So let's just get down to the topic here. Oh yeah, another story on that. And this kind of floods into, I actually consider this thing that happened to me a miracle. Whatever you want to call it. I won't be able to fully describe it, but I mentioned this, I believe, in my first video where I was talking about some of the basics of Hinduism and Vedanta Hinduism, how I happened upon it. But right prior to that, I had a bunch of clients who were Christians, and I wanted to understand their faith. I wanted to understand. I felt so ignorant. So I went and bought the book, The Idiot's Guide to Christianity. I would not recommend it as a way to understand, but I guess it was a start. And something huge happened when I read that. So in a nutshell, what happened, and I've told the story before, is about halfway through, I was confused. I was solid. I was getting headaches. It was terrible. And then a poof occurred. And that poof resulted in something that I've never been able to fully describe. And that is that and maybe I needed this prior to getting into my studies of India and the religions of India. And what happened was I would read something, let's say, further in that book on Christianity, and it would just, it's almost like all at once, all the religious words for that topic would flash, and you could see that they were all one. And it was really, really neat. It was really, wrong word, neat. It was just fabulous. And that started to form what I considered to be the most important concept to date for me. Maybe finding out you're spiritual is an important date. But in my learning of these various religions, instead of having them separated and one right and another wrong, they all became right in a way. And I hope I can describe that in the rest of this video. So, yeah, boy, there's so much I could say on that was just fabulous. So let me and so maybe a lot of this video is going to be summarizing many of the topics in my earlier videos. But let's just go and see what happens. When I started looking into, I didn't even know what Vedanta Hinduism or Hinduism was. And if somebody said, Jim, when I went to my 50-year high school reunion, they said, what religion are you on the website? And I said, India. And I love Vedanta Hinduism. And I guess if I had to identify with one or say one's the senior one, that would be it. But I also love, for example, the four immeasurables of Buddhism. And I've also learned to love the elements of Christianity that I've looked at. And to even say again more let me see if I can pull this down. Let's see, how can I do this? Yeah. So when I look at a lot of these religions, for example, again, they end up being all the same to a degree. And so, yeah, I don't know how else to describe it. So when I first started reading Vedanta Hinduism, and it was in the books Ramakrishna and Vivekananda. Let me put those back up. Here's Ramakrishna on the bottom right. Vivekananda was, I think, passed away in 1905 or 6. But Vivekananda brought the religions of India to the U.S. A remarkable saint. Yeah. And when I read these great gurus, one of the first that leapt out, which followed that whole idea of, when I read The Idiot's Guide to Christianity, that idea that they're all oneness, was many paths, same God. Now you can reword that, and I've seen it worded differently, so I'm not just going off on my own path here, but Many paths, same God, or many paths, same consciousness, many paths, same truth. And in the same light, we had many words, same truth. And I thought that was remarkable. And I will tell you that I have voiced this to so many people and from various religions, and they always go, man, that is great. That is great. And maybe I was voicing it to people that had the same feeling I did, or were distraught about that whole idea of dogma and this is the only path. They just disagreed, even though they were practicing. I had talked to 3 different people. I was trying to just get a little label made once, engraved, and they asked me why, and I wanted it to say free offerings for an offerings box at the to give donations at the temple. And I told them what this quote was, many paths, same God, and then they just thought it was beautiful. And all 3 at different businesses were Catholic, and they said, I just don't like the idea that we are the only way. I thought that was remarkable. And I'm not trying to say Catholicism is bad or anything like that. I'm just saying that's what happened. And I just think that's remarkable. In the same way, many words, same truth, that goes along with this book, the Sermon on the Mount, because the words are different, and each of us then need to find out which words work for us. So I've said all these things before, but what's unique or what's different here is just, I guess I'm shouting to the moon and the star and the sun saying, look, can't we all just get along? But I'm also back to my topic, or the title, trying to make everyone the same goes nowhere. And I believe that's what dogma does. And I was involved with something where they basically said, we're the only ones that ever made it, and we're the only ones, you have to do it our way, and that's it. I have to bite my tongue. Look, if that works for somebody, fine. It sure wasn't my path. I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I learned a lot. I think it opened the door to understanding my true path, which is the paths found in the religions of India, and specifically Vedanta Hinduism. But dogma, and interestingly enough, when I went into the temple there, and I'm going to tell you a couple stories on it that I think are really interesting, I was petrified. I just didn't want somebody telling me this is the only way. Boy, it was the exact opposite. And their facility is on 10 acres, and 8 acres or so is about really a garden. And they'll have a statue of Lord Krishna and Lord Buddha and Lord Jesus. And they have, by the way, these same quotes in another location. And when you walk into the temple, they have big images of Lord Buddha, Lord Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, Lord Buddha, Lord Jesus. They're really practicing it. And I just think that is remarkable. And when I first went into their bookstore, one of the guys, he said he'd been there for years, and we were chatting, and I guess he could tell that I was anxious or worried about dogma. And he said, all religions, Buddhism too, they all have their extremists on the left side, on the right, ones that say, yeah, kill the others and fight and this and that. And even there, right there, you started to see this. I'm sure this is what he was communicating. I know what I received, which is truth is truth. Many words, same truth. Many paths, same God. Consciousness. You could even equate it, now that I think about it, to the 60s and 70s. Be here now. If you really think about it, not just the words, but if you really realized it and fully achieved it, which I don't know anybody that did from that book, Be Here Now, or any of us back then, we're mostly just partying. But if we really got it, we would have renunciated all and found that oneness in the now. Interesting. I will bring this up just as a little display. Get rid of that. Where's the display? I love, let me just kind of move this over if I can. Yeah, there we go, so you can see him. I love this man, Swami Sarapriyananda. He's the senior Swami out of Vedanta of New York. And I have witnessed people change just listening to his videos. Now, if you want to learn about the Bhagavad Gita, basically the Bible of India or of Hinduism, he has a whole series. I really believe that that was written, and his descriptions, many, many videos, is almost a path all on its own that you will walk out the other side changed. But this man, incredible. Incredible. Now, why did I bring that up? There's some other stuff I was going to bring up. It's just the oneness of all these religions. Boy, I'm probably getting too complicated. Oh, I brought that up because there was this title. I just found this. I just looked it up. Dissolve into infinity. So we can say that oneness is infinity. We can say it's God. We can say, yeah, what is? There are so many words for the same truth. And the fact is, I think everything, all the religions say the same. You can't actually, words are Maya, or stuff. And we can't really describe the ultimate truth, the ultimate infinity, using words. I hope that makes sense. But so I remember I did go to a talk where one of the Swamis said, that's why you hear a lot of, well, I had this great, it was like this, or it's like this, because we can't actually put it in words. So I just wanted to get into this whole idea, which my other two videos before Vote really, and another reason why I brought up that Swami, is the beauty of many paths. So we have this, all of us are unique. And if we fully realize in our hearts this idea of many paths, but also of oneness, then all of this hate and criticalness dissolves. They call it dissolves into God, dissolves into Brahman. It just goes away. I think Buddha called it the no self. As soon as that goes away, and we find that truth, the judgmental, being critical, all that stuff that we're seeing these days dissolves. So I find that to be extraordinary. It's the whole idea that accepting or getting rid of dogma in our hearts, getting rid of, by the way, the great Buddha talks about these four immeasurables. And he says, if you want to get rid of that, the cravings, the lust, the greed, you want to get rid of the fears, practice the four immeasurables. I think that's just really, really powerful. The great Vedanta or great Shankara would say, and God, there's just so many paths. That's what I'm trying to bring up. Shankara, as the mind gradually becomes devoted to the Atman or spirit, it frees itself by degrees from craving for sense objects. You just sit there, and the things that have been binding you to your body and to an ego start to lift. There are just these great paths, and I guess what I'm trying to say, and what I just think is so beautiful, is that as we find our path, it's going to be non-dogmatic, and it's going to be our path. Some paths are going to be, and here's, boy, I could go on and on about this. I sometimes marvel at how these, like finding that book and reading it and the change that the Idiot's Guide to Christianity did. And when I went down to the Vedanta Center, at the time I went, why in the world did this just happen? One, that I walked in, and two, that this book on the right, Ramakrishna and his disciples, why was that? I was so full of myself or ego and pride and the path of knowledge. Ramakrishna is an advocate and is the path of bhakti love. So one of the great paths and described in Hinduism, I've gone over this before, so I'm not going to get into it, but I was following a path of knowledge which is described as a much more complicated path, which breeds, or ego can get in the way and kind of blow it up. I'm an example. Whereas Ramakrishna, and I think this is why this book, in essence, I was compelled to buy it, will start tearing down your ego. And he is an advocate of bhakti, love, and as is Lord Jesus. And in that you are becoming, now as a reminder, the word yoga, bhakti yoga, is from the word, the derivation is yoke, which means together. So you're yoking, for example, two cows or whatever it is that pull the thing that toys, the soil gets churned up. So you have a yoga, a yoking together. So yoga is how little s self is yoked together with consciousness, God, whatever word you want to use. See, so that's the word yoga is used in Hinduism and Buddhism. So as opposed to in the West, I think we look at it more as a method of exercise or stretching, or I mean, it also has its India aspect to it too. But bhakti yoga means that through love and worship and everything that that means, you can become enlightened and one. I think that's marvelous, and I have learned to love that and grow with it. And I think that's why that book came up. It wasn't the first book, but it was one of them. And boy, was it a hoot to try to read through my garbage, through my... What the heck are you talking about? If you want to learn about the culture of India, read that book. It's the greatest stories. Oh, my... And I've read it many, many times. And I probably got 10% of it in the beginning. But you also start seeing the oneness. You start getting back to the same idea of many paths, same God, because there's one path, and then you have Buddhas, but I don't think anybody well, that's not true. There are many sects, I'm sure, in these various religions that say you got to go our way. I just think that's the nature of these religions. And I am definitely not for dogma, not at all. In my last other videos, I was just kind of overjoyed at the idea of many, many paths. Go find your paths. Oh, I know what that was supposed to be. And whether it's Buddhism or aspects of Buddhism or Vedanta, and maybe your path in the beginning, you stick very closely and very clearly to one's defined path. But let's not start pointing fingers and acting like you're right and everybody else was wrong. And so that was really what kind of juiced up this morning. I just went, wow, this whole idea that we see it now politically, but it also applies individually and with religions, trying to make everybody the same, that everybody has to do it this way. Boy, and maybe it works for a few. I don't know. I don't really see how it can. If you're boxed in, you can't then... Maybe there's things that need to percolate up and be resolved. That great Swami in New York uses the word proclivities. Proclivities. He has an India accent. We have proclivities, which are tendencies and kind of what makes us up. And a lot of these proclivities we have to let go of. But unless we're devoid of ego, if we sometimes it takes a long time, and I believe that's the power of meditation, because if you're sitting there meditating, especially for long periods, some of these proclivities, you finally just get to the point, all right, yeah, that's not a good one. That's something I got to let go of. And whether you call it dissolving into consciousness, let it dissolve into Brahman, just let it poof away. I read once in mindfulness meditation, they called it noting it and just letting go. Fine, there's another aspect of many words, same truth. So I'm just so in love with this idea of each of us finding our paths. I'm so in love. And by the way, I am not at all upset about any of the things I've looked at in the past. I believe they opened the door to what I believe is this natural path that I've been on for many lifetimes. And I'm just so in love with this idea of many paths, same God, same consciousness, same truth. And that each of us can, maybe I'll just add, that doesn't mean it's always so a bed of roses and it's all so easy. Sometimes letting go of some of these things is interesting. Anyway, I think I finally got to what my purpose was. We do have infinity, consciousness, God. In Hinduism, they call it Satchit Ananda. I've mentioned this before. Infinite knowledge and bliss. That's the concept or words for God. But at the same time, as we're going there, we also have this uniqueness and this unique path. But that doesn't mean we should turn around, and what I see today a lot is people trying to hurt others, saying, no, everybody's wrong but me, or everybody's wrong but my path. Yeah. Anyway, that was really the purpose. Let me look at my notes. Yeah. I think that'll do it. Yeah, maybe I got through it this time. Take 11. Okay, so I hope we all benefit from this. Oh, nope, I got something else I wanted to do. So let me get rid of this just to kind of, I've brought this up before on another. This is the great Swami Vivekananda, from what he said in describing chapter 3 in the Bhagavad Gita. But I think this is the culmination. And as you know, I've been trying to put quotes, and here's another great quote. And it says, even a wise man acts according to the tendencies, the proclivities of his own nature. Are you more contemplative? Are you more thoughtful? Are you more love, caring? Are you more... Yeah, gosh, we're all so unique. If we love and embrace what makes us strong and unique, here's what it is. Even a wise man acts according to the tendencies of his own nature. It is better to do your own duty, however imperfectly, than to assume the duties of another person, however successfully. Yeah, boy, I could tell so many stories about that. When you find your path, whether it's religion or work or what your tendencies are, follow that. You will be so much happier. I just have to throw this in with my brother, who, as you all know, I adored. But I once looked at his junior high school yearbook, and it said, "What's your goal?" And below it said, "Nuclear physicist." What a hoot! So one day he told me, I had no idea. My brother was brilliant. Law review, UCLA law. I mean, this guy was brilliant. He had magic when it came to writing. Magic. But here he was to be a nuclear physicist. And so one day he told me, he said, Jim, I told him I flunked out of calculus. Just couldn't do it. Not my proclivities, not my tendencies. He said, Jim, I flunked out too. This was like a startling moment in my life. How could this brilliant man, well, you see, it wasn't him. I think he found it perfectly in practicing law. And he told me once, don't get into law if you can't read and write, which I could not read and write well. So talk about saving me. I would have failed miserably. But I did find what my tendencies were and my organizational or administrative skills. And it was just so easy. And to see people when they find their skills and how well they do, yeah, it's just extraordinary. And the same applies with your religious practice. Some are contemplative, some are more of a worship and love. Anyway, so it says, better to die in your own path and attempt the path of another. That was from Lord Krishna. That is my path, and I am down here, and you are way up there, and I'm always tempted to give up my path, thinking I will go there and be with you. Therefore, better die working out your own religion than following another's natural religion, however great it may appear to you. That quote sums it all up. And you can see this string of how all these things fit together, the many paths, the oneness, the same time as we're moving along through our journey from little s self to infinity, or big S self, self-realization, God, we also have to sort out our own tendencies, our own proclivities, our own, yeah. And maybe that's all part of it. To gaining because then it's you, then it's your heart, and that's all that matters. Yeah. So I think, yeah, I think that'll actually do it. Okay.